We're at Kingsley Plantation in North Florida, about 30 miles south of the border. We're north of Jacksonville. It's the oldest plantation house in the state of Florida. We're heading towards and going to film the slave quarters, the slave quarter ruins. These are made out of tabby and therefore still exist in some form or other. They're a little run down. Some of them are completely down to a nub, but others are completely remaining as they were, only without roofs, of course. There would have been roofs at the time when people were living there. So we're going to check those out now. And here they are. These are the finest, in my opinion, this is only my opinion, these are the finest example of slave quarters in existence in this country. I've been to a lot of plantations, I've been to a lot of places where slaves were held. Never seen anything like this. Not only are these remain, but these would have been very nice to live in by comparison. A slave, you know, some other plantation would have lived in a wooden structure. This is made out of tabby. You see the remains of a fireplace here. This is really neat. We're live.
We're live.
We're live.
Good afternoon.
Is it afternoon already? Oh my gosh.
Let's see.
Day just gets right by me, man. And this would have been taller. Here's an original sill. So these would have had windows. This would have been cool in the winter, or cool in the summer, warm in the winter. Wouldn't have been much of a winter here, but it would have been more of a winter than what we have back home in the Clearwater area. We're about 200 miles, 250 miles south of that, or north of that right now. Here's the cemetery, babe. The pink flags.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, they buried them right outside their cabins. Goodness gracious. All right, one of the things I learned since the last time I was here is that these pink flags represent where bodies are buried. This is a cemetery. And he said that they're just beginning to do the archaeological research on this area. So that's pretty neat. That is really, really cool. I'm going to come back and photograph that after a little bit, do a separate video on that, maybe even. I'm glad I saw those because I was looking all over for them. But right out front of their cabins where they would have sat, they just buried them. Oh, look here, babe. Here's the difference between the tabby that has deteriorated and the whitewashed. That's pretty cool. That's a good representation. We see a lot of this where the whitewash is more or less, the stucco is sort of deteriorated and worn off on forts and everything else, houses. And here is one that they've restored, or looks, or that, or it's lasted all that time. I probably restored it. There's holes in the bottom and in the middle, rather, for wood. To put boards. They probably use those to sleep on. Probably put something in there. So by comparison to a lot of the slave quarters throughout the South, this is very plush accommodations. These are very plush accommodations, I should say. Every one of these has a fireplace. They all would have had roofs. They're pretty much the same. So this is kind of a housing development in that sense. They had separate rooms, which is another cool thing. So I mean, we all know slavery was bad. We just don't want to relive it every moment of every day in the future. So we don't even have to go into that part of it. But to examine what the accommodations that these people enjoyed by comparison to others. They could have had it a lot worse. So these all look the same. They're just in various different stages of deterioration. I think they must have restored that one back there to show what it would have looked like, because it is completely whitewashed, and that's how it would have looked originally. We have photographs of the originals. Here's one that's completely worn down to the nub. Here's the one that's kind of slightly worn down. The fireplaces remain, but the chimneys are gone. Every single chimney here is gone. Chimney would have stood on the outside here, up in the middle of this opening, and gone up a little ways. This is obviously a reproduction, or not a reproduction, but a restored version of a bigger one. I want to see what this has to say. Oh, this is interesting. This shows how it was done, how it was poured, how it was built. So this is all poured tabby. There's no, it's just straight up poured, like poured concrete. Very interesting, very, very interesting. So they would have poured courses just like you would, even today, like you would use with concrete blocks.